Good morning and welcome to a view from the House this Monday, the 5th of February 2012. My name is Mkokeli Tanda. It's a quiet day at Parliament. Members will spend the day in their constituencies and will only be back tomorrow. But while they are away, we catch up on some of last week's questions in the National Assembly. We look at the question to the Deputy President dealing with delays in infrastructure development projects. There's also an assurance from the Deputy President that the establishment of the Infrastructure Coordinating Commission led by the President is certain to improve the situation. But before we go there, we look at the controversial issue of farm workers in the Western Cape. In a damning report presented to Parliament last year, the International Watchdog on Human Rights highlighted the plight of farm workers in the Western Cape who still live and work under appalling conditions under the new dispensation. Human Rights Watch says abuses are common across farms in the Western Cape and decent conditions that comply with labor and tenure security laws are the exception rather than the rule. It says men and women who produce some of the country's renowned wine and fruit exports are subjected to slum housing, evictions and appalling working conditions. Earlier this year, Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Labour undertook an oversight visit to farms in Citrusdal, Robertson, Worcester and Paarl to get first-hand information about the living and working conditions of farm workers. In an interview recorded earlier, the chairperson of Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Labour, Mr. Alec Nchabeleng, explained the reason behind their recent oversight visit and what they discovered on farms in the Western Cape.
We met with stakeholders late last year, that is 2011, the organizations that are organizing in the farming industry, NGOs, including trade unions. And in this meeting, they raised their concerns about the observations in terms of human rights abuses on the farms in the Western Cape. And amongst the stakeholders were Human Rights Watch, who had just published a report in that same area.
I remember Human Rights Watch painted a pretty gloomy picture about the living and working conditions of farm workers. What were your observations?
In some farms, the conditions are real bad. There are instances where farm workers are kept in containers as accommodation. And in others, the houses were used as fruit drying, for drying fruits. And then those were converted into housing, as accommodation for workers. There are no windows in those in those rooms, and as a result, the conditions are not good for human habitation.
What about the working conditions?
The working conditions on some farms are real bad, terrible, in the sense that some workers don't even have protective clothes, particularly those who work with chemicals, who are spraying chemicals on the farms. They are supposed to have masks and protective clothes. And the farmer, after the workers have used the chemicals, the law says that the farmer must wash the protective clothes to avoid these clothes being washed with other clothes of the members of the family at home, because then there is this cross, contamination of the clothes, and the effects on children can be very, very terrible in the long run.
That's the bad side. Are there any farmers who are complying with the labor law regulations?
Some farmers are really trying very hard to comply. You must understand, Tanda, that not all farmers are managers. And that all people who understand management, some of them are not necessarily involved in the farming industry. So we are there. Part of what the Labour Committee does and the department is to give support service and training to the farmers on how to comply with the laws. There have been instances where even equipment that workers are using, like tractors, they don't have the right covers to cover the some of the exposed parts where clothes can be entangled in the machines and thus causing fatal accidents. There'll be instances where, workers after using chemicals, they've got to be provided with facilities to wash before they can go home. On some farms, the showers are there, but they are just meant for compliance, but workers are not allowed to use them. So this compliance in some instances is very artificial. It's meant for the consumption of the inspectors. But there are farmers who are really doing their best, who have the interest of their workers at heart, and they treat their workers as human beings, and they pay them well, and the accommodation is perfect. There will be some little matters of non-compliance in regard to registration of working hours and leave days, but those are minor. But there are major issues related to accommodation, and the Women's Rights Watch was concentrating on that. The only problem with Women's Rights Watch is that they were too general, when there are other farmers who are doing very well.
But the inspectors from the Department of Labor are supposed to keep an eye on these issues. Is there a shortage of inspectors, or are they not getting cooperation from farm owners?
We have a shortage of labor inspectors. But even if we were to hire 2,000 inspectors, we cannot have an inspector on every farm each day of the week. It's not possible. There must be a buy-in by the citizens to uphold the laws of the country. Labor laws are laws of the country, and contraventions of the law, it's a crime. All laws are equal, and they need to be respected and adhered to.
But are inspectors getting the necessary cooperation from farm owners?
There are instances where farmers are cooperative, but there are areas where farmers will be very hostile. Like when they see the green car coming, they'll loosen their dogs, and that making it difficult for the labor inspector to enter the farm. But that's why we even say that where possible, inspectors should tell the farmers in advance that they are coming. But you see, that again defeats the purpose of inspection. Because if I tell you that I'm coming on Wednesday, you will put a red carpet. And, and when we went to visit, because we gave them 2 weeks in advance notice that we're coming, there are instances where farmers went out to hire movable toilets just for the sake of inspection. But we hope that those toilets will remain on the farm until, proper structures are built.
Now that you visited the farms, what's going to happen next?
The farms that we visited, if we find matters that there is lack of compliance on some matters, the farmer will be given 60 days to rectify those, to correct the mistakes. And after those 2 months, we'll go and visit. The labor inspectors will go, or we as a committee will accompany the inspectors to go and check the progress.
If they fail to comply in 60 days?
If they fail to comply, then notices will be given to them, and those notices will include fines.
Finally, Chair, in his State of the Nation address, the President stopped short of calling for a complete ban on labor brokers. How far is that process now, and when is it likely to come back to your committee and Parliament?
The labor amendment, the amendments are still with NEDLEC, and towards the end of the year, maybe around September, October, they will be referred to the committee. Then we'll have public hearings. Amongst the laws that need to be amended is the COIDA, that is compensation on injuries at work, the UI, the UF, that is Unemployed Insurance Fund, the Labor Relations Act, and the Basic Conditions of Employment Act. So those laws are the ones in line for amendments. The labor brokers thing falls under public employment services. So they too will be discussed during that time when this matter is referred to to the committee. The challenge we have with labor brokerage is that the entry barriers are very, very low. And there are people who can operate as labor brokers, operating from the boots of their car. And this, in a way, takes away, actually labor brokerages trivializes permanent jobs. They turn permanent jobs into temporary jobs. And thus workers losing benefits in the process. Job security, quality of work, training is not there. When you're under labor brokers, it's very difficult sometimes to join the union because there are restrictions in terms of brokerages in workers belonging to the trade unions.
Mr. Alec Nchabeleng, the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Labor, thank you very much for coming through, sir.
Thank you very much, Kokelita.
Okay. That was the chairperson of the Labour Portfolio Committee, Mr. Alec Nchabeleng, talking to us earlier. After the break, we hear why infrastructure programs are delayed and what government is doing about it. Stay with us.